Hi guys, and welcome to tonight's webinar with myself, Martin Sigsworth, and a very big thank you to you all for joining, and also to Andy Bear from Lockton for agreeing to be part of this webinar this evening. I've got a couple of housekeeping issues just to go through before we start. The webinar is going to be recorded this evening. And we'll be sharing that with all you guys that are attending. And we'll also be putting it up on the TPT website for anybody to watch back or share with anybody that you think might be interested. We also I know that we've had some questions submitted. There's a Q&A feature on Zoom, so you can submit questions as we go, and we'll go through them at the end of towards the end of the conversation. We've put a little bit of time apart to do that. So without any further ado, I'll introduce myself. I'm Martin Sigsworth. I'm the Senior Employment Manager with Thomas Cochranton Trust. I've been working in this field for about 5 years now. Previously worked in TV and recruitment. And looking at the attendee list today, I think I've coached a few people into their current roles as well. So it's good to know that you still want to come back and hear what I've got to say. And I'll hand over to Andy in a second, but I'd just like to say that Lockton have been a great supporter of the work that I've tried to do, that we've tried to do at TPT. Ever since I've been in post, we've run a couple of workshops together, and we've also, Andy and his colleagues at Lockton provided a workshop and opportunity for one of our interns as well, which I know was really valuable. So that's a little bit of context as to our ongoing relationship, and we're really looking forward to having Andy this evening and building on the work that we've already done with Lockton together. So I'll hand over to Andy to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about him.
Thank you, Martin. Well, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thanks, Martin, for giving me this opportunity to come and chat with you. I'm a strategic account manager at Lockton. Cochranton Trust is one of my clients. I had a connection with your chief exec going back when he used to work at Post Office, and kindly gave us the opportunity to work with you. And since that time, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we have taken the opportunity to get involved with some volunteering, as Martin described, doing a few training workshops around employability, interview techniques, those sorts of things. And it's been a fantastic experience being involved with the Trust. So the opportunity to join you today was one that I was delighted to take. My background, I have been an insurance broker all my career. Insurance brokers are the middlemen, really. So often a dirty word, I guess. We don't actually provide insurance products. We advise our clients on the best insurance products to buy, and we go and source those products for them. We advise them on risk so that we can make sure that the insurance matches the risks they have. We help them with claims, those sorts of things. So I've done that for 35 years now. I'm just 55 years old. I was born and grew up in London, but when I was quite young, moved to the West Country, where I spent most of my youth. A lovely part of the world to grow up, but employment prospects weren't great. I came up to university to do an engineering degree, which I then dropped out of after just 2 terms, deciding that wasn't what I wanted to do. Went back to the West Country, and really by chance found my way into the insurance industry. I was having a fantastic time on the beach in that particular summer, and my mother said, "You're not going to do that for the rest of your days, sunshine." And my auntie happened to work for insurance brokers. I had no particular qualifications or experience that would suit the industry. In fact, I had to go, in those days there wasn't Google, you had to go to the library to get books on careers and things. And I remember looking up underwriter, which I knew was something to do with insurance. And all I now can remember is that it was next to undertaker in this particular book. And I think I probably made the right choice. So I found myself in the insurance industry. Yeah. I found myself in the insurance industry by chance, but it's been a fabulous career. I think there are enormous opportunities for people in the industry. I've had lots of different roles, and I guess we can touch on some of those during the conversation. But the most important thing for me is that I have enjoyed and found it a really interesting career, and even after 35 years, still enjoy it. So I've had lots of different roles, always been in the city, always working with major corporate clients. And there's, when we talk about the insurance industry a bit later, there's quite a difference between perhaps what I do and more general insurance industry activity. But what London insurance market provides to the world truly is world leading. It's the world centre. The UK exports insurance products and services to the rest of the world to the degree that we're twice the size of the US in terms of those exports. It's a very substantial contributor to our GDP. Even despite GDP being hit hard by coronavirus, the insurance industry has trundled along and still continues to do well. So it really is an area and a sector that the UK leads the world, which is fabulous. So it makes it a great place to work. I've played roles in terms of broking in the Lloyd's market. I've had technical roles, I've had sales roles, I've had client service roles and management roles. And where I sit today is bringing probably most of those things together, working with some of Lockton's largest clients, advising them on their needs for insurance and helping them through some of the difficult times that we're facing now.
That's great, Andy. Thanks very much. So you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think kind of the first question that I'd have is, what's it like to work in insurance?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And let me just sort of separate out perhaps what I do from maybe other aspects of insurance. There are really two key areas of insurance: life insurance and non-life insurance. Life insurance is heavily driven by actuaries, some very big insurance players, and a lot of the jobs involved in that sector would either be analytical or would be call centre based. Most of the marketing now and distribution is done online. There aren't really too many brokers specialising in that area. The general side, which is what most of us would know as property insurance for houses, for factories, motor insurance, liability insurance, is the area that I work in. And there's a very big difference between what is sold and provided for personal lines, so the insurances that we would all buy for our homes and our cars, and small businesses, to what the big corporations need to buy. And the way it works in the UK is that what happens in the London market is very much focused on those major corporates. What's it like to work in as a sector? If I talk about the area that I know the best, which is that major corporate sector, it's a hugely people-driven business. So people contact insurance companies, other specialists. Some use of technology in the way that we communicate. Not much machinery. We don't really have a production line. It really is around the people that we have. And quite a lot of technical skills involved because the products themselves are quite complex. So we'll have people involved who are analytics, looking at numbers, looking at analysing risk. We have large numbers of employees, so we need plenty of people that are good at managing people and have good human skills, if you like. And we have, you have to enjoy being office-based. I think we have a heavy amount of time spent in an office, but we also have the opportunity to travel quite significantly because a lot of the business that's done in London is global. So we travel in the UK, we travel around the world. Now, when I look at sort of those experiences, if you're lucky, you can get to do lots of different parts of it, but there are lots of niches as well. And I remember some of the early training that I had where, you get a specialist come in on behaviour and human nature, and they would assess you as being typically one of four groups. You're either an analytic, you're a creative, you're a leader, or you're a nurturer. And actually, if you look at those, the insurance industry has really strong offerings in all of those areas. So I would say it's a place where there's a home for pretty much anyone, Martin.
Yeah, so looking at them, them four areas, what typically, look at the area that you work in, what sort of job roles could you expect to see working in that field?
So we have people that will spend their time looking at the products themselves. They would tend to be technical. So they would be looking at the legal structure of policy wordings. They would be getting involved with claims, which will often be questions of arguing over sets of facts and over how those facts would apply to policy wording. So a lot of analytical work for sure. The trading in the markets, the broking as we call it, is still very much a people business. It's about the relationships you build, the networks between different insurance companies and underwriters, negotiation skills, but that comes back to really how you manage people and the relationships you build. There's a lot of trust in the insurance industry still. You mustn't forget this is an industry that goes back over 300 years in London when it started in a coffee shop by a guy called Lloyd. And Lloyd's is still one of the leading global insurance markets, 300 odd years later. So we would have roles for people that are creatives. We creative in lots of different senses, actually. Creative in terms of perhaps graphic design and art. We're trying to make a complex subject simple for our clients to understand. A lot of the time we're dealing with non-insurance people, so we might be dealing one day with a risk manager, but often we're dealing with chief executives, chief financial officers, so some super bright people, but they don't know insurance. And trying to turn our rather dry and turgid world of contracts and law and risk assessment into something that a chief financial officer can understand is an art in itself. So we have a lot of people who are very clever at creating visual images and messaging around how we can explain what is a complex product. And then there's plenty of roles for, as I said earlier, around the human resources side of things, because people management is still an important part of what we do because of the number of people we employ.
Yeah, and obviously, there's crossover because we had an intern who come up within your finance team as well a few months ago. So
that's right. Yeah,
obviously the financial side of things, the HR that you'd expect in most industries as well. So. So thinking about if somebody was interested in getting into a career in insurance, what do you think is the most important thing? Is it qualifications? Is it experience? Or is it contacts? Or is it none of them?
You know what? It's a good point, actually. It could be none of those, or it could have all been all of those, because I guess if I look at my circumstances, I'm perhaps different because I was a school leaver then. The only thing I really had was a very loose contact. My auntie just threw my CV into a HR department. I think certainly now the industry's moved on a long way. When I started, you couldn't get a degree in risk or in insurance. These days, you can get degrees in risk and insurance. So I think if you're coming in at entry level, so if you're sort of 18 or 21, qualifications, you're going to need good A levels, preferably a degree. But actually going beyond that, I think probably the most important thing that we look for is we're either looking for people who have experience in the industry already. And if you haven't got that, you're never going to be able to create that until you get your foot through the door and get yourself working in the industry. So if you've got experience, I think, yes, that's really important. If you have experience, you've almost certainly started doing some form of insurance qualification. So they'll go together. But if we look at people that aren't in the industry, maybe they don't have contacts. They've probably got some form of qualification, but it's probably not directly related to the insurance industry. They may have no experience of it and no contacts. Then for me, I think the most important aspect is always going to be around your personal attributes and attitude. And when we hire, and I've seen this in other service sector industries that are clients of mine now, moving much more towards people's basic competencies. And you would have remember that, Martin, in the interview training we did, that there was a lot of talk around competency-based interviews. So people just looking at people's, sort of natural skills. How do you handle people? How do you work in team situations? How good a communicator are you? Are you a team-spirited person? I think that's really important in our industry. And are you someone that's going to get on and fit into the team? So for me, it's all going to be about attitude, likability, personality. Those will be the key things. If you haven't got that, it doesn't really matter about any of the others. But if you haven't got the other aspects like experience or qualifications, then absolutely, those other attributes can get you a job in the insurance industry.
And so let's say that I wanted a jacklisting with TPT, and go and work in the insurance industry. What would be your top tips that you'd kind of give me and say, Martin, this is this is what you should think about, and this should be a bit of a plan of action.
Well, mate, I'd certainly say come and join Lockton, Martin. That's what I'd say. But seriously though, I think for you, and there may be others, if you've got contacts, then absolutely use them, because if you can get a warm introduction, you know, it is significantly helpful. So if you have got contacts, absolutely use those. Let's assume most people haven't got those contacts. And I'm going to focus just on the insurance industry, particularly around London at the moment. Then there are specialist recruitment firms, and they're very easy to find on the internet. Use those specialist recruitment firms because they know the insurance industry, they know how it works. Outside of London, you've still got those firms that will specialise in insurance. There's less in terms of volume of jobs, and I would say the variety of jobs. There are still insurance offices where I live in Tunbridge Wells. There's a very big AXA office. There aren't many insurance brokers around the country now. Lockton does have branches dotted around the country, and there are some small independent brokers still left. Insurance companies themselves don't have a lot on the high street. They've consolidated things into big centres, and if you live near one of those centres, great. So I would say try and find yourself a specialist recruiter, or try and use contacts, and find your way in that through those entry points.
Also look from what you just said about big kind of centres where they're based, you know, maybe seeing if they're in your local area. You know, I'm conscious of people outside of London, so I don't know where they're based, but, you know, for example, I know that previously quite a lot of insurance was based up in Leeds, so, you know, if you're living in that area, you could have a look and see what's in your on local area.
Yeah. So certainly what I do is, I'm afraid to say, pretty London centric. So I moved up from Devon to take the job. But if we think about how people commute in, I commute in a fair distance. London casts a pretty wide net, so we do have people commute from all over the country coming into London. I think what might be quite interesting is after we come through this pandemic, working practices are going to be very different. So that London net may be even wider. And it may be perfectly okay to be able to find yourself a role in the London insurance market without being anywhere near London.
I think, you know, relocating even as a blind or partially sighted person is possible as well. Like, you know, I was originally based up in Leeds before I got my first job in London, and relocated at about 2 weeks' notice. So, which was nerve-wracking, but, you know, 10 years later, I'm still living down here and still working in London, and, you know, recommend it. So even that relocating, similar to what you've done, Andy, from Devon, you know, it's a big move, but it can pay off, and, you know, it's worth it if you've got the job at the end of the day, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
So I just wanted to move on with the kind of, as interested as insurance is, Andy, and I know you're very passionate about it. You know, we've spoke a lot previously, and one of the things which I've really enjoyed about particularly working with you has been the general employment advice that you can share, and, you know, sort of the experiences which you've had throughout your career, and you know, how you've dealt with them. So I just wanted to move on to a bit more kind of like general employment chat, if that was, you know, if that's cool with you.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier on about finding your niche. How important do you think that is?
I think whether it's insurance or not, finding a niche is important for a number of reasons. In my experience, if you've got an expertise, and that's what you develop if you find some form of niche, you make yourself more valuable. And getting a job, keeping a job, and flourishing in a job is, if we're really honest, is about being valuable to your employer, to your customers. So I think a niche allows you to find an area, number one, that perhaps you're passionate about. And I think that's equally important. You know, we all work very long hours. A career is many, many years, decades. And for the younger generation, it's probably going to be much longer than I will work. So having something that you enjoy is absolutely critical, because you can do it a long while, and people generally do better at things they do well. So you're more likely to be successful. So finding that niche, I think, allows you to focus in on something that you really enjoy. And I think equally, finding something that you're good at as well is important for your own sanity, but it's also important for the level of success you have. And again, if you can find an area where you can, you have some natural talent perhaps, or a natural interest, and you can build on it and develop that capability, I think that's pretty important. But I can put that into context, because if I look at my own role, I cover a huge range of areas within the insurance business, because my clients want to talk to me about pretty much anything. So you could argue that I'm not really a niche person because I'm a generalist, but actually that has become my niche. My niche has been an ability to be able to pull together lots of different areas of expertise. And if I've got knowledge in those areas, I use them. But if I haven't, my skill is finding people within my organization or within the insurance industry that do have that expertise. So a niche, we shouldn't be sort of fooled into thinking it means you shut yourself in a cupboard and only ever read one book. A niche can actually be quite a broad church.
Yeah, and I think, from my own kind of personal experience as well, you don't always find that niche straight away. I come out of university and I was convinced that a career in HR and recruitment was what I wanted to do. And then I started working in HR and I absolutely hated it. I really hated it. And realised that, something which I thought, that's what I want my career to be. That wasn't the reality that I thought. And then I bounced around for quite a while, trying different stuff and working in different industries and different parts of recruitment and HR. And then I moved over to TV. And it wasn't until, probably the last 5 years, so when I was 31, that I started thinking about working in employment and in the charity sector in employment, and really found my niche. So it definitely doesn't come straight away.
You raised another interesting point there, and this time last year I went to my son's graduation at UEA and had an alumni come back to speak to the students, who has got himself a very senior position somewhere in the civil service, and he'd had a fascinating career and obviously hugely successful. He'd worked with prime ministers, heads of state from around Europe and the rest of the world, and a very interesting guy. And he said, and it was a wonderful message to give the students, actually. He said, when he left university, he went through 3 different jobs trying to be an accountant, until in the 3rd job, someone said, "Do you really think you're cut out to be an accountant? You keep failing at this." And his message was, you don't stick at something unless you really enjoy it and you're good at it. And don't be frightened to try something different. Don't be frightened about failing, because that's what helps you find your niche. You'll find your right direction. And I thought that was quite a powerful message on a number of different fronts, about finding something that you're passionate about and you enjoy. But I think also the resilience that you need in a career. And my career's taken lots of twists and turns over the years. Most of them actually sort of imposed upon me. Some of them were out of my own choice. But through mergers and acquisitions and things like this, and changing jobs and even a redundancy. And I think that being resilient through a career, being resilient to knockbacks, is critical. And one thing that struck me with the employability training we did with the trust was when we were talking to the guys that came along, they had a lot of knockbacks. And I think, the visually impaired have to be resilient just to do what you do. And I think that resilience is a great strength, and it will be absolutely vital in a career.
I think resilience is, it can manifest itself in a number of different ways, can't it, at the end of the day? And I think you've got to be quite resilient in terms of how you look at yourself as well. Sometimes when you're getting them knockbacks, to think there's more that I could be doing. Am I performing as well as I should be in interviews? Am I doing as well as I could be on a day-to-day basis in my job? And do I need to step up a bit? So there's that part of it, and then there is dealing with knockbacks as well. So how do you kind of go about staying resilient, Andy? Because I know you've had kind of points where you've been facing redundancy or being made redundant. Like how have you been able to adapt to them circumstances?
Probably a process of learning through those setbacks over the years. I wouldn't say that I was naturally a confident person when I was younger. I think I've gained that over the years. But I did have a self-belief, and I also was somewhat determined that I was going to get there. I didn't mind if I had to take lots of small steps as I climbed the mountain, but I just always seemed to want to keep on climbing it. And so I think self-belief is really important. I think when you get those knockbacks, you got to be honest with yourself about what happened. And there have been times when I've said, yeah, actually that was just misfortune. And so the next time it will be good fortune. That will give you the confidence to pick yourself up, dust yourself off and crack on. But other times you've had to say, yeah, you know what, there was a lesson that I learned there. And I've been a great believer I suppose I have a natural interest in learning, but I've been a great believer that this is a journey through a career. You have to grow, you have to learn, you have to be prepared to challenge yourself. And I think if through all of that, you're just honest with yourself, you continually try to be the best person you can be, then that's all you can ever do. And when I've had setbacks, whether it's been, you spend a couple of years working really hard in a certain team, and suddenly there's a divisional change, you've got a new boss who just doesn't see the world the same way as you, you got a choice, haven't you? You can either think, well, okay, I'm just going to chuck all that away and give up, or you can say, no, I'm not going to be beaten by this. I'm going to turn this to an opportunity rather than it being just a challenge. And I think often, we look at what's happening in the world at the moment. A lot of people, I think, are pretty negative about what we're going to face in the next few years. But my view on it will be, there will be opportunities. So yes, there will be some hard times perhaps for all of us. But if we work hard, if we're smart, I think if we take a positive mental attitude, which I think is also really important, then we have a very good chance of finding the opportunities that are going to come out in this new world that we're going to emerge into.
It's interesting when you talk about that self-belief, and I think this is something which definitely in my younger days I struggled with. I had periods of when I was unemployed, particularly coming out of university and seeing my mates kind of walk straight into jobs, and not necessarily the dream jobs, but walk straight into jobs and thinking to myself, I'm not sure that this is ever going to happen for me. This is a lot harder than I thought it was actually going to be. But I just I always knew that I was good, and I had to take some risks, and I didn't immediately walk into the job that I wanted, and it didn't pay as much as what I maybe wanted it to. But just knowing that was kind of that first step onto the ladder, and I knew that if I worked hard, then I could get the experience that then I needed to move on and go do something else, something that I was more interested in. Also I remember before I worked for TPT, I was working for another charity, and I come for a promotion there, and I thought I'd done pretty well at the interview, but I think I didn't get the job, and then the feedback that I got was really insightful, and I'd kind of went and chased that feedback up myself. It wasn't just dished out, and I was kind of like, look, I want you to be really honest. Tell me where I fell down and what I could have done. And the person that interviewed me gave me some really great feedback, and you take that away, and I was thinking to myself, what, that wasn't because of any, that was only my own fault. I didn't prepare well enough for that interview. I didn't answer it well enough. Kind of everything which I preach to people now to do, I wasn't doing at that point. So, it's quite important. So,
you make a good point about taking a risk, though, actually, Martin, because I think you are going to take risks with things, and you are going to fail at things. I think it's Michael Jordan that did a great Nike advert about every basketball shot he'd missed rather than all the ones he'd got. And he said, if I didn't miss those, then, I would never have had the opportunity to get the ones I got. This idea that you can fail and be successful is something I was not brought up with. That I was brought up with a fear of failure. And I was very nervous about failing, even down to silly levels where when I was young, if I had to go to a big presentation, if I had to meet senior people, I'd get really nervous about it because I didn't want to fail in front of them. And then you start to work out that we're all human and that you don't learn anything except from the mistakes you make. So failing is a natural part of what we do. And I think being prepared to take a risk means you accept that you might fail, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think the other point, you talked about sort of direction. I've always found it really helpful to have a plan. I had objectives of things that I wanted to achieve. I had a plan that was short term, where you can get really granular about what am I going to achieve by the end of the year or in 6 months. And you can really do things about those. But if you have a plan that sort of takes you east when your long-term journey needs to go west, it's not much of a plan. So you need to be thinking longer term as well. And then what I learned over the years is that plan for your career has to be consistent with what you want out of life. Because if you get a conflict between the demands of your job and what your job is going to ask of you and what it will give to you, if that conflicts with what you want out of life and what you want to be as a person, that's a massive problem. And you're never going to be happy, and you're never going to make a real success of it. And I think just stepping back and thinking about what you want out of life, and then how you can build a career that has stepping stones to getting you there. I think having that kind of plan, it'll be different for everybody. I've always just found that really useful.
Yeah. I think that that thing of like work actually making you happy is really interesting as well, because I was working in TV. Now on paper, most people would think that's an amazing job, it's an amazing industry to work in, and to be fair, at times it was, but the hours that I was working and the pressure which I was kind of under on a day-to-day basis, and the instability of that work as well, moving from kind of short-term contract to short-term contract, just meant it was really unsustainable for me, and I ended up hating it. And it was something where I worked in it for a few years and probably enjoyed it for about 2.5 of those years, and then really didn't enjoy it for about 18 months. And that was the point where I kind of had to reevaluate and how I need to think about what's going to make me happy, and is it going to be spending the next 10 years working in TV and being stressed out my head for, the supposed perks that you were getting from working in that industry. And I don't even think that was just me because I was blind, just because I was blind. I think it's something where I've spoken to quite a lot of people who work for the charity sector, who I've kind of been like, did I know you at Channel 4? And it'd be like, oh yeah, we definitely met there. And it's like, oh, yeah, you made that switch as well to get out of this sector, which is just really just can be really hard work. So
would you agree that when you're not happy, you don't perform as well? It's very difficult to go full gas on a job and give a great performance if you're not happy. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and like kind of this is going to kind of move on to something which I want to talk about next, which is networks. But I think having those people around you that believe in you as well, and having like that person or a couple of people that are like, that you can go and speak to and be very, very honest with, and they're going to tell you, that you are good and that you are capable of doing X, Y, and Z. I think that's kind of really important too. So, but yeah, so. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
I was just going to say one other point before we move on to networks, because I think you wanted to move on to networking and relationships and the importance of that, Martin. But just thinking about what you were saying about being prepared to change the way you work, so that, or even the job you do, so that it fits in with the wider life you lead. I remember really clearly when I had children, which was, correctly 25 years ago, feeling this really difficult decision coming. I was commuting, I was working long hours, I was traveling a lot, there was a lot of socializing after work. And I was pretty scared that, I was never going to see my kids, and that was not okay. And I made this conscious decision that I was going to turn all that way back and make sure that I got home, most evenings of the week at a reasonable time, that I had enough energy to do things with the kids in the evenings and the weekends, and that I wasn't a sort of, disappear from the scene and be an absentee father. And I really thought that might compromise my career. And, I can honestly say that it hasn't. The only thing that's compromised my career in any way, or how far I have or haven't got, has been my own abilities. It wasn't the fact that I wanted to, have a family life. So I think, it is, people can get frightened of, doing anything that seems to cut across the career. And my advice would be, don't be frightened of that. I think it's more important that you get the balance right between the two. Sorry, I was just going to add that to what you said, Martin.
No, I think that's, I think it's great, because of the different priorities when it comes to working, and those, those change as you get older and things like that as well. Yeah. So, that's kind of forever changing. And that goes back to what you were saying about having a plan, doesn't it? And reevaluating that plan. Like, what your plan was at 21 isn't going to be what your plan is at 41 or 31.
No. And you keep adjusting your plan. That's I think essential, because life changes, the world changes, circumstances change, and but having that's where I think a long-term objective. My nephew lives in the West Country, and he came up and had a week working in the city with me to see what it was like, and he loved it. But at the end of the week, he said, "Uncle Andy, I've really enjoyed my time here. But what it's taught me is I want to be able to go surfing at 5 o'clock every evening, and I can't do that anymore." And to me, that was a really smart thing to deduce, because he'd worked out this really long-term life goal was a lifestyle that he wanted to lead. And he knew that if he chose a job up in the city, it compromised that lifestyle. Yeah. So his path will take lots of different directions, but he knows the lifestyle he wants. So I think that was really important, quite mature for a young guy as well.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So I just want to move on to talking about networking now. This is something I'm going to hold my hands up that I hated. I hated doing networking. I still find it difficult to this day a bit, but I kind of realised the importance of it. And as I touched on earlier on, particularly when I was working in TV, that the ability to network was imperative for getting contracts. And I kind of touch a little bit more on that as we kind of talk about how I've done that as a blind person. But as somebody that's working in the insurance industry, and given the career that you've had, how important do you think kind of that networking and building those professional relationships is?
I'd say it's highly important. I found it hugely valuable on lots of different levels. And I don't think it's just the insurance industry. You only have to look at the success of things like LinkedIn to see how widely people want to network across different industry sectors, whether it's financial services, manufacturing, retail. I think it is important. Coming back to what you said though about sort of you felt that you weren't good at it, you didn't enjoy it, you didn't like doing it. I can sympathise with that actually, and I think you can take different views on what networking is. Some people seem to want to obsessively just have an address book, and they'll go to any event and they will link in with you and you've never met them, and then they think they've got a network of 700 people. And that was the sort of networking that I also found really difficult. I didn't enjoy going to endless cocktail parties, having superficial conversations with people who I was unlikely to need to see again. And if I turn up and want something from them, it was going to look hugely cynical. But I think you can look at networking in a different way. And so I think it is really important. For me, networking is about making sure that you spread your net in terms of the business you do as wide as you can, that you treat people well in every contact you have, because those people will remember whether you treat them well or not. And I think there's a huge integrity issue there. Over the years, I've learned that actually you probably have to do a bit more than I originally thought in terms of making an effort to keep in touch with people and to make sure that that network continues to grow and to stay relevant. And of course, people will come in and out of that network. So I don't think it has to be as cynical as perhaps some people might portray networking as. I think it can just be about having, good behaviours, valuing relationships, I think valuing the people and treating them with respect when you come into contact, whether it's colleagues, people that work for you, people that you work for, clients, whatever it might be. And I think in terms of when I said it's important at different levels, for me, in the job that I do, the relationships I have around my business, around the insurance industry, are critical in just getting the day-to-day job done. Because I cannot do for my clients everything they need to do. I will need to go to insurance companies. I'll need to find an underwriter that's prepared to look at and insure the business I want them to insure. I might need to find a claims person who's prepared to help me with a claim. I might need to get some expertise around a specific legal issue or a class of insurance. So I use those at just a basic level every single day. And I think that's probably true of a lot of people in their jobs. And they may not even think of that as networking, but that is your network. The people that you're dealing with on a regular basis, that becomes your network. And then I think if I took it to the other extreme, I was made redundant when I was about 47. Prior to that, I'd left the job I'd had for 25 years and done very well there. Took a bit of a bold move, took a bit of a risk, went somewhere to set up some industry practices, another major broker. Went very well for 3 years. And then there was a change of managing director who fired my managing director and decided he didn't need me and the rest of the team either. So we were all kind of walked in one morning at 9 o'clock, asked to hand over our phones and told to leave. So it didn't work out such a smart decision, I guess, to have gone in the first place. But what really helped me then was not the headhunters and the employment agencies. It was my network of contacts. And I was lucky I had a bit of protection under my previous contracts. I had some time before I was going to run out of money. But I kind of put myself together a project which was finding a job that I was going to really enjoy doing. And that was really important to me. I was going to potentially, work another 15, 20 years. I didn't want to be doing something that I didn't enjoy. And it was through the network of contacts that I had, people I was able to talk to, that helped me get to where I am now. In fact, the guy that runs Lockton in the UK, in fact, he now runs Lockton in Europe, was a grad way back when I first started in the industry, and we'd known each other then. We'd had some contact over the years. We'd never worked with each other during that period, and it just came the right time. And that was what got me back into employment. So I think those networks help at every level, Martin. Have you found that with what you've done?
Yeah. So when I first, so I before I kind of worked at TPT in the employment field, I had previously worked here for 6 months as part of the research team, and then I'd left to come work for another charity. And I'd stayed in touch with the HR officer at TPT, and I was kind of like, always keep me, always drop over an email if you've got any jobs coming up, because I did enjoy working here, and I just need to do this for kind of career progression. This move isn't because I didn't like the charity or anything. It was just I needed a bit more stability. It was a permanent job. It was paying a bit more money. I said, but do send over any job adverts that come up. And then I've been in that role for about 14, 15 months, and she'd actually dropped over this email just going, "Oh, we've got this employment project coordinator role. I'm just dropping over in case you think that you might be interested." And I still had to go through the application process like everybody else did. But if I hadn't stayed in touch with her, and I wouldn't, I don't know if I'd have necessarily known about the job. And here I still am 5 years later, and I've moved up from project coordinator to senior manager. So that it just in that alone, it wasn't networking in the sense that, as you were saying, kind of going to cocktail parties or what I used to have to do with TV was a lot of that. It was a lot of going to boozy events and buying the right production manager a beer and chatting to them, and then staying in touch and sending them a tweet or whatever the next day. It was very simply just going, I did enjoy working here, so do keep me up to date on any roles which are coming up. And I kind of have to use networking in a different way, even in work. We're always looking for people to work with, and I'm always looking to get advice on different different topics. And we're developing a learning management system at the moment within TPT, and I'm working on that project and developing some employment content for it. And I went and spoke to a few people that I just contacted through LinkedIn that I knew done this sort of work, and I was literally just dropped a bit of an introduction email as part of it. Like when you connect with somebody on LinkedIn and you can personalize your invitation, just done that, told them what I was after, how I'd heard about them, and then maybe like 50% of the people I contacted got back in touch, and then probably another 30% of them I arranged a call with. And just doing that sort of stuff is really helpful as well. And I know those are people that I'll be able to call on again, further down the line if I need any more help, or if we, something completely unrelated that we might want to, work with them on. So I think networking is really, really important to get into careers and to progress as well, and to keep on doing your job as well as you can. So.
Yeah, well, certainly, I suppose it's because I've done this quite a long while now, but pretty much all the new clients that I have won in recent years and are talking to now are people that I have worked with in the past. And it goes back to the importance of, networking goes well beyond, as you say, having that beer with someone at a social event. It goes down to doing a great job with and treating people well and doing the best you can for them every time. And in fact, it's how I ended up working on the insurance side with the trust, was that Charles Colquhoun, your chief exec, had been at post office, and I'd worked hard for him there, and he liked what I'd done, and he came to me and said, Andy, we'd like you to kind of help us. So I think, you can be judged by how you treat people and how hard you work for them, and it pays back over many years. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I always think of kind of networking, and particularly when you're kind of contacting people through LinkedIn, it's like corporate dated. Like you've got to play the ratios a bit, and everybody that you contact is going to be interested, and you can't get demoralised by that, and just keep on contacting people and asking for advice, and eventually like that somebody will get back to you and give you that time, and then once they do, it's just really important to show gratitude and your appreciation, but to then stay in contact with them as well after that. So.
Yeah, and that comes back to what you were talking right at the beginning about, how do you get into an industry, whether it's insurance or anything else. And it can be really hard to get. My son's just come out of uni, and he found it so hard to get a job. He got a first in his degree, and you'd think I thought he'd walk into something, and it was really hard. And you just have to be super persistent. And actually, just not be embarrassed about keeping asking people. It's about that belief thing. If you have belief that you've got something to offer a firm, then you just got to keep banging on those doors. So, it's persistence, I think, is and not giving up on things is important at all stages through your career, whether it's getting the job or whether it's working your way through a career.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we need to hurry this along. I'm aware we've got about 13 minutes left, and I think some questions have come through as well. But I just wanted to spend a little bit of time, Andy, on what for once you've been through that journey, you found what you want to do, and you're kind of working. What do you think is needed to succeed while you're in work?
And that's interesting, because there's this sort of idea that number one, you've got to survive in the job because it's a pretty tough environment at times, but you want to flourish, you want to do well. And I think it's some of the things we've already mentioned, certainly your personal attributes, the way you behave. I had a very early boss who sort of said about the insurance market. He said it's a very small world here. He said, if you stitch someone up, they will remember it forever, and the rest of the market will know about it. I think it's kind of a good analogy that your behaviour and your integrity is absolutely sacrosanct. And I think succeeding in a career, people around you have got to trust you and respect you. I think if you start there, then you can build the technical capabilities you might need in the job. I think it's always been important to consider it as a journey. None of us are the finished article at any point in our career, really. And having a willingness to learn and to grow for me personally, that makes it interesting anyway, actually, and exciting. But I think if you're going to succeed in a career, you have to do that. And there was a horrible cliche someone once said to me in one of the training things I've been on years ago. Said, if you're standing still, Andy, you're going backwards. It was absolutely right, because everyone else is going forwards. And I was a little daunted by that, but then I just realised it's actually quite exciting to be continuing to learn. So I think challenge yourself, keep learning, stay relevant. At my age, I'm 55 now. When I started, all my clients were older than me. Now they're all younger than me. And staying relevant to someone in their 30s, even 40s, now becomes my challenge. And the world of risk and insurance has changed. So I've had to keep on developing my knowledge. It's hard work to start with, but actually once you find your way of doing it, then it just becomes a natural part of the day to day. So I think succeeding, I think the plan helps with succeeding as well. I was never happy just to settle for, I'm going to do this for the rest of my days. I was always looking for the next challenge, and I wanted to stretch myself. So, but that might not be, the driver for everybody. I think people can have, you get to it, and maybe I've even reached that level now where I'm probably not going to take any bigger jobs than I've got, and I'm going to work another 10 years. But for me, I'm actually really happy with that. So my career objectives have now shifted a little bit. It's around the satisfaction I get from doing a great job, and holding on to that integrity I've built up over all the years. So I think lots of different things in terms of succeeding. I think growing yourself is critical, having a plan, positive attitude, and your behaviour, the way you treat other people will, you're never doing the wrong thing if you do the right thing, as my father used to say to me.
We spoke prior to this call, and one of the things you said to me, which I think I always think as well, is when you get to the end of the day and you ask yourself, have you earned your pay for that day?
Yeah.
And I think as long as you're answering that yes, then you're well on your way to do them well. So right, I'm going to move on to some of the questions that we've received. If that's okay with you, Andy. Now, some of these might be best placed to answer. Some maybe not be used. So we'll kind of go through them. So one of the first ones that we've received is, would lockdown produce challenges within employment? I think both of us can kind of answer a little bit on this. I think obviously there are some challenges regarding employment which come out of lockdown. I'm not going to sit on this webinar and lie about that. We don't know what the job market's going to look like. It probably is going to be more competitive as a result. But equally, I think employers are looking at working practices very differently. And Andy, you've touched on this, haven't you? That Lockton, that come from, you've got a really fancy flash office in like East London, which when I visited, it's just absolutely blown my mind. But that you guys are now looking more at working from home and the benefits that has brought to not even like a handful of people, but nearly everybody in the organisation.
Yeah, I think. First of all, I agree with you. We don't really know what the world's going to look like. I think there are going to be some challenges with the employment market. And we could talk a bit more about that if you wanted to. But in terms of, for us at Lockton, very early on, we identified that this was working actually much better than we thought it might. We tried hot desking and part-home working 2-3 years ago, and it really didn't work. And I think that was much more to do with mindset than whether it actually could work. I think people just didn't buy into it. Now, this has been forced upon us, and there's been some really interesting quotes. The chairman of Barclays has said, am I ever going to have 7,000 people back in my tower block in Canary Wharf? The answer is no. And I think, and we're taking that same view. This is not just about the fact that it's very expensive real estate in the city, and we're a growing business and we'll need to keep renting more of it. This is much more to do with the fact that we're seeing that people are more productive, people seem to be happier, and as we said earlier, happier people tend to be more successful. So
Yeah.
I think we will end up with an environment, I suspect, and we've had some staff surveys on this where I already know that the overwhelming feedback has been people saying they want to be able to some degree work from home. It will vary absolutely down to individuals. Some people have a great environment to work remotely, others don't. And some roles are much more suited to it. But there's absolutely no doubt that we have a very large proportion of roles in financial services that are being done in offices with people cramming onto trains, filling up public transport, polluting the environment. And those jobs do not need to be done to the degree they are in offices. And even if people said, okay, I'm now working 2 days a week from home, that's 40% less load on the transport system and 40% less load on their stress levels. So I think, and certainly Lockton is going to have a much more flexible environment. We haven't quite worked out exactly what it's going to look like, but it will be a lot more flexible than it was.
Yeah. I think the potential for home working for blind and partially sighted people is definitely beneficial as well in terms of getting to work and things like that. So we'll quickly move on to the next one, which is, will social distancing have any effects on working for disabled employees? Again, it's hard to call that. I haven't got a crystal ball, but what I would say is that every disabled person that I've met has already had to be extremely adaptable in terms of getting into work, finding a way to do documents or to do jobs differently to what somebody without a disability might do it. And I suspect that once we know more about social distancing and what's involved and we can kind of do more of it in practice, disabled people are extremely adaptable and find solutions to everything on an everyday challenges. So I wouldn't envisage that this would be any different, and we'll find a way to work around it, I think. So.
Yeah, I think, Martin, you're right. I think social distancing will affect everybody, but I would also say it won't be here forever. There will be a period of time, but we will have to get back to normality. The world got back to normality after Spanish flu, which was way worse. It got back to normality after SARS. We will. It's just a question of when, not if.
Yeah. Right. Next question is it's quite a long-winded, quite a long one, but when accepting a job, can you and the employer add clauses to a contract which are specific to your disability? For example, that they will provide any written material in a suitable format, or that they will make certain adaptations. The short answer to that is no. You wouldn't really need to do that. A contract of employment is more to do with your terms and conditions. What I would say is that any reasonable adjustments, an employer is legally obliged to implement. So, if you needed something in an alternative format, then legally an employer would have to make that reasonable adjustment for you. So, it wouldn't be in your contract, but it'd be a conversation which you'd have with your employer around that. So. If it's all right, Andy, I'll move on to the next one. The next one, is it appropriate to ask my employer if they would be willing to provide disability training for my colleagues when I start a new job? Again, yes, is the short answer to that. Absolutely, I've done that in the past. And Andy, if you employed somebody with a disability and that request was made to you, what do you think your attitude would be? And Lockton's, that's probably the best way to look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have some disabled people in the office, and the people that work with them are made, obviously made aware of their needs. And I think as a business, you want your employees to succeed. It's not a matter of disability or anything else. You want all employees to succeed, and you give them the environment for them to be the best they can. So, absolutely, and you should be having those conversations with employers, and they should welcome that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think where possible, maybe do that training yourself as a disabled person. That's what I found most effective, particularly when I worked in in television. You know, I kind of told my colleagues what I wanted, and they were pretty good at putting that in place. But every now and then I kind of have to remind them. That's kind of part of the course, but you know, it's as long as you're working collaboratively to do that, then I think you can, just, it isn't an unreasonable request. So there's been one I've made about doing group work and attended training courses. For example, how do you take notes, taking the information from presentations, and ensure that any training is given in a format which is suitable. In terms of getting the training in a format which is suitable, I would always contact the training provider first. Tell them what I need and when I need it. So if I need any teaching materials in advance, I'd ask for them to be given to me in advance. I also find it quite beneficial to try and have a chat with the facilitator of the training as well. I've had to do that a lot recently. So yeah, I'll put that in place. In terms of note taking, again, it's personal preference. I know there's a lot of different assistive tech to help with this, but I generally take a laptop with me and take notes as I go, particularly on worksheets and things like that. And taking in information from the presentation. I guess, well, I'd hope that if the presentation's been engaging, you'd be taking it in. If you're not taking it in, then maybe it's a problem with the presenter. So, but those are some quick fire tips that I think would help. I think we've had some other questions as well. So let me just have a look. I've realised that we're going over time here. Yeah, we'll maybe take just 5 more minutes if everybody's okay with that.
I've got one here, Martin, if you want me to pick it up.
Yeah, go on then. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just popped up on my screen about, in relation to insurance, how difficult would it be to transfer skills from a banking background? Not difficult at all, because I think all of the core skills that you would need in that part of financial services would be highly relevant to insurance. In the banking world, you have to do banking exams. Unfortunately, they're not a lot of use. If you come to the insurance world and want a serious career, you'd have to do insurance exams as well. But I think there's all the sort of skills that you would need in terms of working in teams, dealing with people, dealing with complex issues, that sort of financial services environment, yes, would transfer across very well to insurance.
Great. I think there was another question as well, which I'm just going to have a look, see if I've got. Multitasking is one of the things that I need to develop, by the way.
There's one popped up here, Martin, and I think it's from Michaela, and I think I remember Michaela from employment training. So hi, if it is you, Michaela, hello. It's not come up totally clearly. It's saying, how would you discover what you need from work to succeed versus, I think is versus what you want out of life. So I think that, that's a question of sort of perhaps going back to some fairly basic things of looking, if money's going to be a really important part of your world, if it's really important that you earn a certain level of income, clearly there are certain jobs that are not going to get you there. If you have, as my nephew did, a part of the world that's really important for you to be in, then having a job that relates to to that area is going to be important for you. If you're a sort of person that loves to be outdoors, and I have plenty of friends who have that kind of desire, working in an office like I do would not suit them. Equally, there are other people that don't want to be out in the wet and cold in winter, and my daughter loved the idea of working in an office. I think you can break it down to some really simple things. But also, I think more importantly, maybe it's about the amount you want to commit to work. And that certain sectors and certain jobs are going to be very, very demanding and are going to be very consuming of your time. You're going to chew up pretty much every day in the week to your job. That may not suit you. So I think what I'm trying to say is think about the sort of things you're prepared to give to a job, and the sort of things that you want to give to things outside of work, and make sure that balance is going to work. And I always remember there was a guy that ran BP, a guy called John Brown, who I think became Lord Brown in the end, and he was renowned for being a workaholic, and that just happened to suit him. He worked 7 days a week for BP. Heaven knows what he was like as a family man. That wouldn't have been my choice, but for him personally, that's what his life was about. And so at one extreme, that was kind of the decision he made, and then there's my nephew who wants to be a surfer. So
we could do a webinar alone on that, kind of asking what motivates you as an individual and things like that. It is so different for everybody, and what ticks one person's box isn't necessarily what ticks somebody else's. But Andy, we've kind of run over time, which I thought we might. We can both chat a bit. But thank you ever so much. I think it's given a good insight into the world of insurance, and and hopefully people that have been online will might think of that as a career now, and they definitely know a company to go knock on the door of. But from my perspective as well, it's really interesting to see sometimes I have the tendency to think that my challenges are because I'm blind, and that they're exclusive to me as a disabled person, but they're exactly the same as kind of what you've faced throughout your career, and we have the similar kind of coping strategies and the same things that have led us to where we've got, and hopefully some people can take that away and put it into their day-to-day kind of thinking and their employment journey going forward as well. So I just really want to say thanks, mate, and I enjoyed it. I hope you did, and I hope everybody else did as well.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. It was a pleasure. I hope people weren't too bored by an hour of insurance talk.
Perfect. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, guys.
Cheers all. Bye.